Hello friends, my name is Sunil Ranjan and I'm an English teacher. Now here in this video I have come up with Gerontion by T.S. Eliot. Well, telling you first about T.S. Eliot because it is important to know about the poet also. Well, Thomas Stearns Eliot, popularly known as T.S. Eliot, was a poet, essayist, publisher, playwright, literary critic and editor. He was born on 26 September 1888 in Missouri, USA. He is considered to be one of the 20th century's major poets and a central figure in English language modernist poetry. He moved to England in 1914. Deciding to work and settle there, he renounced his American citizenship and became a British citizen. His poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, caught widespread attention in 1915. The poem was received as a modernist masterpiece. Then came his other best-known poems, The Waste Land in 1922, The Hollow Man in 1925, Ash Wednesday in 1930, and Four Quartets in 1943. He was also known for his plays Murder in the Cathedral and The Cocktail Party. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948 for his outstanding pioneer contribution to present-day poetry. He died in 1965. T.S. Eliot's poem Gerontion has a Greek title for Little Old Man. The poem is a dramatic monologue and comes from the perspective of an old man, Gerontion, who lives in an old house. Gerontion discusses themes of religion, sexuality, and other general topics of modernist poetry. The epigraph that appears at the beginning of the poem, which reads, "Thou hast not youth nor age, but as it were an after-dinner sleep, dreaming of both," comes from Shakespeare's Measure for Measure. It suggests that neither youth nor age has any importance, since life is essentially an illusion. The speech is an extended meditation on old age and death. The narrator of Eliot's poem is himself close to death and reflects on his own mortality in terms of the decay of civilization. Now coming to the poem, first I'll read out a few lines and then I will come up with the explanation of the lines. Well, here I am, an old man in a dry month, being read to by a boy waiting for rain. I was neither at the hot gates nor fought in the warm rain. Now the explanation is, as the poem begins, the speaker says that he is an old man. He says that it was a dry month and that he was waiting for rain. The old man then laments his age and regrets not participating in the war. As the poem was written in 1920, it is implied as the World War ended in 1918, and it is a reflection of that. Describing the scene of the war, he says that instead of being in the warm rain, swirling through marshes to fight the enemy, he was an old, decayed house where he was in. The decayed house may refer to the house he was currently in, or it may also be a metaphor for his old age. He goes on to describe the mundane household he is in. He describes the owner, a Jew. He describes the landscape and the woman who keeps the house. They are all portrayed as regular and common. This, in contrast with the hotly described battlefield experiences, only enhances the condition the old man is currently in. We get an idea that the old man was in a house in a valley by the way he speaks of the goat coughing overhead. The old man says he is a dull head among windy spaces. By this he means that in this world where everything was changing too much and too fast, he was remaining the same, dull. But does he regret this? It is answered in the following paragraphs. Now coming to the lines again, not knee-deep in the salt marsh, heaving a cutlass, bitten by flies fought, my house is a decayed house, and the Jew squats on the windowsill. The owner, spawned in some estaminet of Antwerp, blistered in Brussels, patched and peeled in London, the goat coughs at night in the field overhead. Rocks, moss, stone crop, iron murs. The woman keeps the kitchen, makes tea, sneezes at evening, poking the peevish gutter. I, an old man, a dull head among windy spaces. Now the explanation. In these lines the poet says that he is not knee-deep in the salt marsh with broad, heavy knife bitten by flies and fighting. The images the poet presents here are scary, painful and uncomfortable to imagine, but they are more appealing and exciting to the speaker, the poet. Eliot uses juxtaposition in order to compare his present situation to the war. About his present situation he says that he is in a decayed house. He is living in a rented house and the owner is a Jew who was born in some cafe of Antwerp in Belgium, had swellings on his skin in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, and adjusted and disturbed in London. The owner of this house is a Jew, which reminds of Christ, who was also a Jew. His mind flickers over lessons from human history, all of which reveal a people preoccupied by present concerns and devoid of a spiritual passion. A bit of ease and humor runs through the lines where Eliot comments on his landlord, who happens to be a Jew who keeps a watch by sitting on his windowsill. The poet describes the landscape surrounding the decaying house. There is a field overhead where the goat coughs at night. There are rocks, moss, fleshy-leaved plants with star-shaped yellow and white flowers and dung all around. The poet mentions a woman who maintains the kitchen and makes tea for him. She sneezes every evening when she pokes and clears the drain. The poet uses a metaphor by calling himself a dull head among windy spaces. Through this metaphor he means the emptiness of his life and his inability to fill it as he has grown old. Now coming to the further lines. Signs are taken of wonders. We would see a sign, the word within a word, unable to speak a word, swaddled with darkness. In the juviscence of the year came Christ the tiger. In depraved May, dogwood and chestnut, flowering Judas, to be eaten, to be divided, to be drunk among whispers by Mr. Silvero, with caressing hands at Limoges, who walked all night in the next room. Now the explanation. The poet then speaks of signs. Signs are often used in religions to convey a path, truth or decision. The poet says that signs may mean anything. They may have different interpretations. They may mean word within a word, unable to speak a word. They are wrapped in darkness. The line, the word within a word, unable to speak a word, originated from a speech by 17th century bishop about the Christ child and God's word. When quite young, Christ the tiger came in May, when people had become morally corrupt and wicked. There were only dogwood and chestnut trees and the betrayers like Judas emerging. The poet refers to the communion or mass which divides and shares Christ's body and blood to be eaten and drunk while speaking very softly for the sake of secrecy. The next moment, the poet's mind rolls back to other occupants in the building. Mr. Silvero, who was always out to help, and Mr. Limoges in the next room, who could be mostly noticed walking all night. Now, moving further as the lines go. By Hakagawa, bowing among the Titans, by Madame de Topquist in the dark room, shifting the candles, fraudulent Von Kull, who turned in the hall, one hand on the door, vacant shuttles. Weave the wind, I have no ghosts, an old man in a draughty house under a windy knob. Now, in this stanza, there are references to World War I in the form of names. Mr. Silvero, Italian. Hakagawa, Japanese, modern-day Tonquist, French, and finally Fräulein von Kulp, German. They represent their respective countries. The old man speaks of their behavior in the war through the actions of the people belonging to four powerful countries. The Italians talked sweet but remained restless. The Japanese bowed to Italians. The French kept delaying by shifting candles in the dark room, and the Germans entered the war but were ready to leave any time. The old man again regrets his inaction while so much was happening in the world by saying, "I have no ghosts," meaning he cannot recollect what happened in the war, as he had not been a part of it. He continues to be in the old house with cold wind blowing and the doorknob rattling. Now moving further, after such knowledge, what forgiveness? Think now, history has many cunning passages, contrived corridors and issues, deceives with whispering ambitions, guides us by vanities. Think how, think now, she gives when our attention is distracted, and what she gives with such supple confusions that the giving famishes the craving. Giving too late, what's not believed in or is still believed in memory only, reconsidered passion, gives too soon into weak hands. What's thought can be dispensed with till the refusal propagates the fear. Think neither fear nor courage saves us. Unnatural vices are fathered by our heroism. Virtues are forced upon us by our impudent crimes. These tears are shaken from the wrath-bearing tree. Well, of course, these lines have been too long and the passage has been too long, but then I move on to the explanation. In this stanza, the speaker makes a series of statements about history and how difficult it is to understand its complexities. The poet personifies history as a female who has cunning ways of managing events her way. She makes leaders nurture their personal ambitions secretly. How people are guided by vanities. How she creates confusion all around, and how she excites the ambition of the people to be more powerful. Sometimes she shapes events too late, which had never been expected. Sometimes it runs true to people's expectations, and their burning desires and passions remain in their memory. The word knowledge in the biblical sense means sex knowledge. Therefore, history is considered as a beautiful, cunning prostitute. History deceives and misguides man. Courage may lead man to gain ambition, and fear may bring with itself a sense of humiliation. The experience of the First World War shows the great crime committed by those in power. The knowledge of history is like the tree of knowledge, which was responsible for the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. History cannot give any guidance for spiritual salvation. It distorts human values and causes treachery, double-dealing, and violence. History often gives power to the weak, and not doing so often creates an atmosphere of fear all around. The old man thinks that neither fear nor courage saves mankind. All immoral activities are born of heroism. What is accepted as virtue is shameless crime forced upon us. Mankind gets shaken by the suffering and the tears all around, resulting from the failure of faith in God. It can also mean that to be a God-fearing Christian is similar to fearing a tiger. Now, moving further, the poem goes, "The tiger springs in the new year, us he devours. Think at last we have not reached conclusion. When I stiffen in a rented house, thinks at last I have not made this show purposelessly, and it is not by any concitation of the backward devils. I would meet you upon this honestly. I that was near your heart was removed therefrom, to lose beauty in terror, terror in inquisition. I have lost my passion, why should I need to keep it, since what is kept must be adulterated? I have lost my sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. How should I use it for your closer contact?" Now, coming to the explanation, The old man says that judgment will come. The tiger springs and us he devours speaks of divine judgment of all mortal sins. The tiger is a reference to the Christ. The old man says that when he dies, he would face God honestly. The old man says that he did not have a purposeless and sinful life. When he meets God, he would say that he did not get close to his heart because he was lost in terror resulting from violence and war, and had lost his passion for the divine. The old man says that he has lost his passion that he nurtured earlier for the divine. Because of his distance from the divine, he admits having lost his sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. He asks as to why he should continue to be in that state of mind that kept him away from God, as what is kept is always mixed with other things that divert one's attention from what one needs to focus on. He admits his sense of loss as he asks for divine guidance to stay in close touch with God. Now, moving further, these were the thousands small deliberations, protract the profit of the chill delirium, excite the membrane when the sense has cooled with pungent sauces, multiply variety. In a wilderness of mirrors, what will the spider do? Suspend its operations? Will the beagle delay? Di Belanche Fresca, Mrs. Camel whirl beyond the circuit of the shuddering bear in fractured atoms. Gull against the wind in the windy straits of Belle Isle, or running in the horn, white feathers in the snow the gulf claims, and an old man driven by the trades to a sleepy corner, tenants of the house, thoughts of a dry brain in a dry season. Now the explanation goes, the old man here speaks of how mechanical this world has become and how even without passion people continue to work. All seem to have become disillusioned and restless because of the loss of passion. He speaks of the spider, the small beetles, and of forces of nature that don't delay and continue to do the same thing over and over again without interest, without passion, without heart. The wilderness of mirrors shows a world where humans run from one place to another, but reaching nowhere finally. They all are trapped in a maze of mirrors and have lost their path. The poet further speaks about Di Belanche Fresca, Mrs. Carmel, the shuddering bear, the windy straits of Belle Isle, the white feathers in the snow, and so on. His mind moves randomly to many things, but finally he finds himself very lonely, driven to a sleepy corner of an old house, away from the workings of the world. These are the thoughts that run through the old man's mind. At the end of the stanza, it comes back around to the old man who is at the center of these thoughts and predictions. He is driven by the trade winds to a sleepy corner where he waits out the rest of his life. The last two lines of the poem reminds of the dry season and refers to all these thoughts as coming from a dry brain. The speaker's separation from the contemporary world, specifically present trends in politics, religion, and social life, is quite clear. The end of the First World War did not lead to any great political or social results. Many thought that the war was the result of utter human stupidity and the colossal waste of natural resources. It shows that there was something entirely wrong with the modern civilization. Thinkers offered three explanations of the decay of modern civilization. First, European civilization had lost its rich religious heritage. Second, it was dominated by commerce and money values. And thirdly, it was marked by sexual perversion, squalor, and rottenness. This poem, Gerontion, reflects all this and comes to the conclusion that only faith and moral values can save modern civilization. The decayed house of Gerontion is the symbol of decadence of modern civilization. The poem is an embodiment of the popular discontent caused by the First World War and the wave of disillusionment which swept Europe. Eliot's strong belief is that civilization can be saved if it revives its Christian faith and follows the moral values of church. Well friends, here I come to the end of the explanation of the poem with the text, and if you subscribe to my channel, I promise to come up with quality videos for you from time to time. Thank you.